Hey class, so we're going to be talking about critically thinking about art within our world. So this is going to be a longer essay that is starting to introduce you to research, as well as still, closely reading the text and using those skills we've already gained in our earlier essays. So make sure you look at our syllabus and schedule again for when the rough draft, the peer reviews, and the final draft are due. So, overview. We have started reading literature heavily saturated in controversial representations of race, nationality, identity, and or gender at this point. So you're going to choose one or two maximum readings that we've reviewed in class, but not the play and not the novel and not a work you've already written on. So what does that mean? It means you can compare a poem and you can compare a short story. So any of the poetry, any of the short stories that you have not written on prior, okay? And so you're going to use those to analyze the way the texts are discussing ideas and issues surrounding race, nationality, identity, or gender. So you can just focus on one aspect, right? You can pull a short story and look at gender, or like how the women are being represented or the men are being represented, how is masculinity being shown, that sort of a thing. Or you can also then combine these, right? You can look at how race and gender kind of overlap and what is the intersectionality, what is the text showing us in this intersectionality, right? Is it different than if they weren't connected? And then same thing with like identity or nationality, right? So individually or can be combined. So you want to focus on the positives, negatives, multifaceted nature, social injustices. There's so many ways that you can take this, but the biggest thing is what is the question you want to ask yourself is, what is this text demonstrating about this, right? To kind of dig in deeper. In looking at these texts for the way in which they portray a major topic, such as one of the ones listed above, you're strengthening your critical thinking skills while learning the ways in which art is able to present complicated topics and ideas that are relevant within our society. Identity is so personal, right? And so because of that, there's all these different layers that you can really dig at. So for the prompt, for this assignment, so much scrolling. For this assignment, you will develop a 1,500 to 1,900 word essay. So we're slowly but surely increasing our amount, right? We're really kind of pushing us to that final essay point. So you are going to also need 2 outside sources minimum and a maximum of 4 outside sources. So that's the starting point, right? You want to make sure you're finding your sources. It's helpful to have an idea of what your thesis will be a little bit, but keep it loose while you're doing your research. And then once you do your research, you might be like, you know what, I really want to change the direction of my thesis. And that's natural that you kind of hop back and forth. So it's good to not be so concrete and write your whole essay and then be like, all right, I need to find sources now. Like, look for those sources in the drafting process. So you'll be focusing on 1 to 2 texts. So also, mind you, this is not like our prior essay of comparing and contrasting, right? It's not comparing and contrasting the two necessarily. It's examining how, if you do choose to write about 2, how both are demonstrating it and what they're demonstrating, right? I mean, there will be some compare and contrast, but this is not a compare and contrast essay. So this essay is meant for you to explore the way literature is used to address relevant ongoing issues within society in relation to human identity and categorization. You must ensure that your thesis is arguing something specific about the ways the text is addressing race, nationality, identity, or gender. Don't let your thesis be too general because your argument will in turn be too weak. So you want to make sure that you're still honing it in, right? You don't want to say something like, this text is showing that, men are bad, right? We don't want to be saying something really vague and generalizing like that. We want to really get into the nitty gritty, right? It could be like, women are being shown as, a certain way because, like, you want to dig into that, like, specificity of like what it's showing. You don't want to just generally sort of clump all of it together. So you're gonna focus on something thematic in relation to one or more of these three elements. And you might also want to frame your essay by using one of the theories we have reviewed up to this point. So if you want to use our theory textbook as a supporting point, or supporting our secondary source, right? It's not a primary source. Our primary source is our literature we're using. You can use it as the secondary source. And then you can also find outside research besides that. But so you can use the theory if you want. So my biggest emphasis here is do not veer off from the literature and find outside sources that are discussing the topic in general. Since this is a literature course, you do still want to try to find sources that are commenting specifically on the literature. I worry that you're going to focus too heavily on society as a whole and veer away from the literature. We want to stay really centered and focus on what the literature is showing us about the world in general, not necessarily what's going on outside the world that then can relate to the literature, right? Like obviously there's a connection, but stay focused on the literature. So for the requirements, you're going to start with an intro, and you want your intro to have a hook of some sort. Introduce your text in your intro paragraph like we've been doing. Have a fully developed thesis in connection with the prompt right above. So explaining one of these elements, what is it demonstrating, how and why do we see that? Use introductory sentences that transition smoothly and work to introduce the ideas for each paragraph. Think of that mini thesis idea, right? It's promising what's going to come in that paragraph, kind of like how your thesis is promising what your whole essay will be about. You want to ensure that your body paragraphs provide strong analysis and explanation of your quotes. Don't just drop a quote in and then run away from it, right? We want to make sure we always follow it up with more info and explanation, like how and why. You also want to not add a quote at the end of a paragraph because that's a hit and run, right? We want to always follow it up with more explanation of like why this is important. And make sure we're giving credit where credit's due for the outside sources, right? According to Smith, blah, 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 right? Make sure that you're kind of always giving that nod as well as citing. So you're going to remain on topic and be sure to clearly analyze the way in which these texts address race, nationality, or gender as a topic of issue. It could be just identity too. You're going to draft a conclusion that is memorable, global, or sheds some sort of insight. Craft an enticing and relevant title, so not essay 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Something different. Write with clarity and precision, demonstrating a mastery of standard English grammar, punctuation, mechanics, MLA format. Make sure we're writing in an academic tone, third person, no yous or I's, no colloquial language, meaning no informal language, no slang, right? 2 to 4 outside sources, and from Santa Ana, actually, and from the library database would be preferred. That's where you really want to start your research, is our Santa Ana library database. And then you want your essay to be 1,500 to 1,900 words. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you find that you have some questions still. I know I didn't give a lot of specifics in this video, but I would be happy to kind of work with you with what your starting ideas are and what literature you're wanting to write about. And you can kind of send those just chaotic ideas to me via email, and we can kind of flesh it out and kind of talk about that, okay?